Today we're taking an in-depth look at the RX Storm RX870, which was sent over by the folks at MechLands. For the sake of brevity, I'll be calling the board the RX from this point on. The RX is available from MechLands, pre-built for $99 in 3 colorways with TTC C-Cloud switches and TBT double shot keycaps in the ASA profile. I was sent the white-gray colorway. As of this writing, the RX is only available for pre-order. The RX is a tri-mode TKL mechanical keyboard with south-facing hot swap sockets, a plastic case, and polycarbonate plate. At first glance, it seems like a pretty boring keyboard, especially when we compare it to the keyboards I've looked at lately with knobs and screens. But I did find some pretty interesting tidbits while tearing the board down, so stay tuned for that. The RX is quite a nice looking board. It's pretty heavy despite its plastic case, which is described as an injection molded plastic that's thicker than most. It's also got this kind of faux leather texture to it. Above the arrow keys, there's a metal badge with RX Storm branding and an indicator light that we'll talk more about in the software and RGB chapter. The bottom case piece is split into 2 tiers, the top one being rectangular and following the shape of the top case piece, and the bottom one being beveled, which gives the board this floating rectangle look. There are 4 fixed rubber feet, a triangular metal badge with RX Storm branding, and another metal piece that wraps around toward the back, framing the wireless dongle slot, mode toggle, and USB-C port. It has the keyboard's name embossed on it, as well as the words Super Mechanical Keyboard, which is a little bit obnoxious in my opinion. There is side lighting on the bottom case that's angled down, making it a bit hard to see directly from a normal typing position, so it seems to just be for reflecting onto your table surface. The included keycap set with this white-gray colorway is very nice. You've got white alphas, light gray modifiers, and dark gray accents. The contrast between the white legends and the light gray modifiers is pretty low, which I normally don't like, but I think it looks quite good here. These are thick double-shot keycaps, supposedly made of PBT. They're in the ASA profile, but they seem to be different from the ones made by Akko. I unfortunately don't have any Akko ASA keycaps anymore, so I can only go on memory and what information I can find online. From what I can remember, Akko's ASA has a textured finish, while these are very glossy and smooth. The font used in the legends also seems to be the same as on Akko's ASA, but they made some weird decisions on the legends of certain keys. For example, they split the word pause into 2 lines, whereas Akko has opted for PS, or for smaller letters, to fit the entire word pause in just 1 line. The included switches are TTC C-Clouds or Yunhai. There's not much information on them from MechLands, so the following information is from switch retailer Milktooth. The TTC Yunhai is a pre-lubed 5-pin linear switch with nylon housings, a dust-proof POK stem, a long 23mm spring with a 50-gram bottom out, and a light diffuser. In its stock form, it's pretty smooth and makes no unpleasant sounds. Nothing scratchy, rattly, metallic, or pingy. This board's case is held together mercifully with screws instead of tabs. You'll need your own tool to undo these 6 hex screws, as the board does not come with one. Once those are off, you can remove the top case piece, which has metal threading for the screws. Next, carefully lift the PCB plus plate assembly off the bottom case and disconnect the 2 cables attached to it, one for the daughter board and the other for the battery. Looking first at the bottom case, you'll see this sheet of metal that's screwed to the bottom case with 5 Phillips screws. This metal sheet seems to act as a weight for the keyboard. Underneath that, you'll see the daughter board, battery, and a small magnet to secure the wireless dongle in its slot. Going back to the PCB plus plate assembly, we can see 6 silicone gaskets slotted over some tabs jutting out of the PCB. There's a piece of EPDM case foam underneath the assembly. Removing this will reveal 6 standoff screws that you'll have to remove to separate the PCB and plate. These are also Phillips screws, but they're not the same as the ones holding the metal weight to the bottom case. Between the plate and PCB are 3 sheets. The topmost is a thick sheet of Poron foam for sound dampening. Underneath that is a thin sheet of IXPE foam for sound enhancement, and underneath that is a thin sheet of PET plastic. I've seen this kind of plastic sheet on a lot of keyboards lately, and I did not know its purpose until I got this comment saying it possibly serves the same purpose as the tape mod. We'll put this to the test later in the sound chapter of this video. The plate is made of polycarbonate and has a lot of flex cuts. The PCB PCB similarly has a lot of flex cuts. The metal piece framing the USB port is removable by undoing 2 hex screws that are not the same size as the case screws. This is not a necessary step when tearing the board down. The metal badge on the top case piece and the triangular one on the bottom case piece do not seem to be removable. There's quite a bit of RGB lighting on the board, your usual perky LEDs, side lights, and a small indicator light on the metal RX Storm badge between the navigation cluster and arrow keys. That indicator light seems to be constantly on and corresponds with the board's 3 connection modes: white for wired, green for 2.4G, and blue for Bluetooth. The LED on the escape key is also a battery indicator, flashing red when low on battery, solid blue when charging, and solid green when fully charged. In wired mode, this LED is just constantly on, which is very annoying. The perky LEDs will also turn on every time the keyboard starts up, which is annoying. There's no software link for the RX on the MechLands website or anywhere else that I could find for that matter, so I had to ask MechLands for it. Curiously, they sent me a link which I've included in the description leading to an EpoMaker domain. Perhaps this means that MechLands also has some kind of EpoMaker connection like we saw previously with Sidu. The software is your bog standard proprietary keyboard software where you can map keys, set macros, and customize the RGB lighting. Unfortunately, there's no option here to disable that battery indicator LED on the escape key. You can set the lighting mode to off to keep the RGB off even when the keyboard starts up. There's quite a lot of factors I'd love to explore when it comes to this keyboard's sound. I'm particularly interested in that metal sheet that seems to act as a weight, and also in that PET plastic sheet. For our first sound comparison, we'll remove the case foam and the metal sheet weight to see what effect this has on sound. Without the case foam and weight, the board sounds a tad bit louder and higher pitched. A word that comes to mind here is sharp, not exactly harsh, but harsher. To me, it's actually an improvement, but only because of how the spacebar now sounds more in line with the alphas. On the stock configuration, the spacebar is very distinct and distracting. Without the case foam and weight, the whole thing sounds a bit more uniform and harmonious, which I prefer, even if it is a tad bit harsher sounding overall. You can also see that there's a bit more flex to the board, but this isn't something that I noticed during normal typing. Next, let's see what happens when we remove the 2 sound enhancing sheets, the IXPE foam one and the PET plastic. We'll also keep the case foam and weight out of the board for the rest of these tests. Without the 2 sound-enhancing sheets, the sound gets, unsurprisingly, pretty unappealing. Thin, shrill, and plasticky. Would not recommend. I'm curious about the contributions of each of the 2 sheets though. Does one have a greater effect than the other? Does the PET sheet really mimic the tape mod? Luckily for me, the teardown on this board is easy with screws instead of tabs, so doing all of these setups is at least less of a hassle. Our first comparison will be between a setup with just the PET sheet versus one with just the IXPE sheet. Honestly, these 2 sound identical to me, which is kind of surprising. The sound enhancing sheets definitely do their job, and the combination of them is better than either one alone. Now it's time to do the tape mod and see how that stacks up. As usual, I'm doing 2 layers of painter's tape. I much prefer the tape mod on its own to either one of the IXPE foam or PET sheet on its own. It's a more uniform, lower pitched sound, which is what I'm after in a keyboard sound. To me, there are two setups that stand superior over all the others. The one with both sound enhancing sheets and this latest one with just the tape mod. So to determine our ultimate setup, we'll do one final comparison pitting these two against each other. It's a little bit anticlimactic, but to my ears, these two setups sound identical, which is pretty interesting. At the end of the video, I'll put two final extended sound tests using different keycaps and switches, and the setup for these will be with the two sound enhancing sheets and without the case foam and sheet weight. So please stay tuned until the end of the video for that. At first glance, the RX Storm RX870 is kind of a boring keyboard. Plastic case, no screen, no knob, no VIA compatibility. But once you dig deeper and use the keyboard for a while, you do discover some interesting components, and you realize that the board is quite well constructed and very enjoyable to use. The plastic case is thick and solid, the weight adds heft if you're into that, the teardown is a breeze, and customization is easy too, with each sheet of foam and plastic and metal being its own distinct, easily removable piece. I know I did a lot of different setups here, but my conclusion is that the board sounds great stock and doesn't really require any tinkering. The only real downside I could find is with the RGB lighting, the escape key battery indicator being constantly on in wired mode, and the lighting turning on with every keyboard startup. The latter is fixable by just setting the lighting mode to off using the software, but the former is just something I'll have to live with. The included switches and keycaps are high quality too. All in all, for $99 US, this is quite the deal that I would highly recommend. And that's my review of the RX Storm RX870. What do you think about this keyboard? Do you own one? Has your experience matched up with mine? If you don't own one, has this review convinced you to get one? Let us know in the comments. I've got quite a few keyboards and keycaps on hand and on the way, so the videos should be pretty regular from now on. Up next, we've got ceramic keycaps from Cerakey, so make sure you're subscribed if you'd like to see that. Thank you so much for watching.